Hi, this is Glenn Davis from Lenexa, Kansas, and the name of this video is Country Guitar Licks and Laughs. And this here is a country guitar lick. And tonight I'm playing in front of a live audience. Thank you, dear. And you see, I haven't played that country lick much. My dad showed it to me probably in the early 60s. But to be quite frank, my entire guitar playing life, I have endeavored to be a big rock star. Well, since that hasn't worked out good, a couple days ago, I decided I was going to play country guitar. You know, maybe be a country star. Heck, I don't know, country performer of the year or something. And before we get started here, I do have one public service announcement to make, and that's that the health department said it was more healthy to drink from paper Dixie cups than it was using a regular glass. And so I went out and I bought a box of those paper Dixie cups. I put one in our bathroom, and to be sanitary, we all use that one now. Thank you. Well, this here, I only know two country licks. You heard the first one. This is the second one. That's called a G run. Lester Flatt's played it a lot. I knew that since the 60s too. But before we get much into that, I'll tell you, when we first moved here to Kansas, I was still working at the time for a big company, and they had an employee break room. So my first day on the job, I went into the employee break room, looked in the refrigerator, and I was surprised that all the food had names. So my first day on that job, I ate a tuna salad sandwich named Ralph. Well, I planned on playing a guitar solo, a country solo, but I didn't know any, so I looked one up on this guitar site called Anyone Can Play Guitar. And there was this young English fella named Adrian, and he had a complete country solo with one lick. And guess what? That lick was... So I lucked out. I can use my G lick and make a whole solo out of it now, thanks to Adrian. So here's my rendition of Adrian's country solo. I'll kiss your butt. And then for the audience, if you want to show some expressions of excitement, country folk yell out yee-haw, yahoo, or yippee-ki-yay. But I would be careful with the yippee-ki-yay, because I think that might be reserved for cowboys exclusively.
Yee-hoo!
That's close enough. When we visited some small towns around Kansas when we first moved here, one town I was talking to this old fella, a very old fella, and during our conversation I asked him, well, have you lived here all your life? He looked at me real surprised and says, well, not yet, I haven't. And as we got talking, he got sad, and he told me it's because he had this very old dog, and he had to have that dog put down. And I asked him, I said, well, was the dog mad? And he says, well, he weren't none too pleased about it. And as we kept talking here, he told me he had to dig 3 holes to bury that dog. I said, 3 holes? He says, yeah, the first 2 just weren't deep enough. Well, Ned Miller, he was a singer and a songwriter, and he came out with this song, From a Jack to a King, in 1957. And the melody went something like this. And that was the end of the melody. Then he put this real fancy lick in there. It went... And I liked that lick, and he did it again through the song too. He played some interludes in there, and he used double notes, something like, and he put the lick at the end, and it sounded real good. It went like this. So I like that, mainly because I like the double notes. Well, we made some more trips to small towns in the area. In one small town, the center of attraction was a dinosaur bone that the town owned. And as I was standing there admiring that dinosaur bone, the mayor came up, and me and the mayor started talking. And I said, "Do you think you know how old that dinosaur bone is?" And he says, "Well, I know exactly how old that dinosaur bone is." He told me it was 1,000,004 years old. And I said, "Wow, you have that pretty exact." And he says, "Oh, it's not that hard to do. You see, it was just 4 years ago. We had a young scientist come through town, and he told me it was 1,000,000 years old." Well, I like those double notes we played in that Ned Miller song in 1957. In 1959, another song came out that had a lot of double notes in it by Marty Robbins called El Paso. I believe it was a session guitar player named Grady Martin played the intro and most of the guitar in the song. And he used these notes. I guess he could have went down one more. He could have went up a couple more. But he did what he did, and I'm going to try and play that intro for you. And that was his intro. And then he, throughout the song, at the end of each verse, he put in a really neat guitar lick, something like, and he probably did 20 different things at the end of each verse, something like, and he did something like, so he played a lot of them, and I liked that song. Let's end that with some double notes here, just to end the double note portion of this video. And you know what you call a fella who hangs around with a bunch of musicians?
No, I don't.
A drummer. Well, I knew this drummer, and I saw he was lugging his gear around, and he looked like he was having some trouble, so I asked him, and he says, "Yeah, I have a week back." I said, "When did you get that?" And he says, "Oh, about a week back." Well, here's I thought it was a country riff. Of course, that's from Susie Q by Creedence Clearwater Revival. But what I didn't realize is they didn't make up that riff. That's a James Burton riff. I didn't know who James Burton was at that time. He played a real fancy version of that particular riff. And even though I didn't know who James Burton was, I knew I liked Ricky Nelson. And in 1963, Ricky Nelson had a song called Fools Rush In Where Angels Fear to Tread. And within that song was my favorite guitar solo, which was played by James Burton. But I didn't know again who he was at the time. But the solo went something like this. Doing some funny picking up here on the neck. I never quite figured out how he did that, but it was still my favorite solo of the time. So I used to watch a show called The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet because the Ricky Nelson Band played in that television show, and I always hoped to see the guitar player play, of course. And sure enough, one night I'm watching the show, and I really never knew a lot about it. In fact, I don't remember, but I think he had a younger brother called the Beaver that was always getting in trouble. But anyway, I was watching the show one night, and right near the end of the show, they start playing Fools Rush In, Where Angels Fear to Go. So I'm watching the TV, hoping to see him play that solo, and sure enough, right near the end of the song, they cut it short, I guess, because of time, and I never did get to see him play it. And I was terribly disappointed because of that. But you know, I wasn't half as disappointed as the girl who didn't know the difference between Vaseline and window putty. Did you hear about that young girl?
No, I haven't.
Well, all of her windows fell out. Well, I'll tell you something else too. I'm retired now, and I'm getting concerned if I'd have enough money saved up that it was going to last me the rest of my life. So I saw a financial advisor, and I told him my situation, and I said, is there some way I can make my money last the rest of my life? He picked up my sheet of paper, looked at what I had, and he says, you know, if you want to make this last the rest of your life, I would start smoking and quit exercising if I were you. Well, I got one more here. The price of meat keeps going up, and I go to the grocery store, and there's not a lot I can afford anymore. As a matter of fact, the only thing I can afford to buy anymore is deer balls. Yeah, that's right, deer balls. Them are still under $1.
Yahoo!
Well, I guess it's time to end this video. We'll do a lot of editing before we put it out.
We have no editing software.
Well, I guess that's it. You all have a good night, and check out my other videos.